Hello everyone, welcome to today's 30-minute webinar on everyday simplification capability. Just before we get started, I wanted to check that you can all hear me okay. So you should have next to your name a chance to raise a hand from the options to say that you can hear me. So if everyone could just raise a hand to say, yes, I can hear you, that would be great. So it's a little drop-down menu just below the attendee list on the left-hand side of the panel. Perfect, getting a few raised hands and a few more. So I'm assuming the people who haven't raised a hand can't find the button. Okay, looks like everyone can find it. Thank you very much. So thanks for coming. What we're going to do is spend the first 25 minutes or so as me sharing some of the content that we've got, and then leave 5 minutes at the end just for a question or two. But as we go through this, if you just want to drop your questions in the chat box at the bottom, any questions we don't get to, we can try and pick up with everyone individually after the webinar. So who are we? So we are an organisation that helps create simpler organisations by identifying and removing unnecessary internal complexity. I'm James Rothwell, one of the founders, and really what we wanted to talk to you today is one of the key components of driving a simpler organisation. And that is everyday simplification capability. So our definition, what is it? It's really the ability for people at all levels to be equipped and empowered to simplify. And whilst this simplification capability isn't the only thing that is needed to really change how your organisation is, it's one of the key components that you need to be able to spread it across all levels, across your business for you to simplify. The three key components of that really, and we'll go into each one in more detail as we go through. One is the ability to actually be able to identify some of the complexities. So to see past the fact that this is the way it's always been done here, and actually say, actually, this is complex, this could be easier, I could be spending my time on better things. And then having the courage and the tools to challenge it and to redesign that work in a way that it is simpler, or be able to stop it entirely. And then thirdly, it's being able to demonstrate behaviours that not only support you in removing complexity, but also help you drive the simplicity every day going forward. So without further ado, we'll get into some of the content. So why is this important? So the problem, I think, is pretty clear. More and more organisations are starting to talk about this each year. Organisations are becoming more complex. No doubt you're all on this webinar because you sense it yourselves. It's just harder to get stuff done. It's harder to make a decision. It's harder to find the time to focus on the important stuff. And yes, whilst the external world is getting more complex, there's more demanding consumers, there's more regulation, we've got more global footprint than we used to before, many reasons. But as the BCG study we referenced there says, actually the complexity internally is growing far faster than what the world around us. So there's really no excuse to continue to blame the outside world. And so a lot of organisations are waking up and they are doing something about it, but most of them are focusing on structures and systems and processes. And whilst those are vital in many cases to really shift how an organisation works, they really don't address often the stuff that we spend the majority of our day doing, so the everyday activity. And so for that we need something which is more easy to get across the organisation, that doesn't rely on a big structural change. And that's where this everyday simplicity capability that we believe in is what we want to talk about today. So you can see from the numbers here that actually the case for change is large, it's significant. The majority of, we've picked 3 daily activities, so emails, meetings, reporting, mainly because they're the things that, in our experience, most people spend the majority of their day on. And you'll see that actually, although, to say there are other everyday activities, clearly, policies, processes, whatever it may be that you spend your time doing, but just to kind of paint the picture of the size of the opportunity here. These are various data points that we've found in the public domain, and some are backed up by our own recent research. So, for instance, emails. 28% of time is spent on emails. So over 8 hours a week, typically just reading and writing emails. And an insurance company we're working with at the moment, when we actually measured how they spend their time, 77% of that time is just digesting incoming emails. So, 6 hours or so is just spent digesting what the organisation and others in the organisation are sending to you. And we're not saying emails, meetings, reports are all bad. They're clearly not. They're very useful tools. But the worrying thing is the amount of time we spend on them, but also how ineffective the use of them often is. So if you take meetings, many of us will no doubt spend more than 15% of our time in them. And it clearly varies much by level. And with many execs spending well in excess of 40% of their time in meetings. And again, meetings aren't bad, but when 69% of people feel that actually they're usually not productive, or whatever data point you choose to choose, there's a massive opportunity there to free up time for better stuff. And finally, reporting. This was a data point that came from BCG for the most, I think the 20% most complex organisations. So clearly not all of us spend 40% writing reports, but the reality is that we're in a world where we're swimming more and more in data, but yet lacking clarity on what decisions we're trying to make with that data, who needs this data and what. So we churn out report after report that may not be even read. I will share an example later on reporting. So just putting some numbers around it, an example, 1,000-person organisation. What is that? What is that opportunity? So if we just took the emails, 28%, assume that everyone in that organisation spent that much time a week on emails. That's a cost of 8.4 million a year just to manage emails. So if you take a reasonable number of a reduction, you could, 20%. That's £2.5 million worth of extra capacity to redeploy. And the insurance company we're working with, when we looked at just moderate improvements in meetings and emails for a 115-man team, that was the equivalent of 12 headcount that could be reallocated to the more strategic projects. So that kind of paints the picture of the size of the opportunity. What we'd like to move on to now is some of the tools and the approaches that we use with our clients to help drive simplicity into the organisation. And there's three main elements. So the process, the tools, is really designed around everyone in an organisation being able to learn these skills. It's not, not reserved for the leaders or for the managers, but everyone to start challenging what we do. And then the everyday activity. So using tools, examples from other organisations to inspire how is it that we could simplify some of the stuff that we do, so we're not reinventing from scratch. And finally, simplicity behaviours. So much of the complexity we experience in our organisations is formed from the daily actions and habits that you or I follow, and therefore actually if we've got behaviours that we can bear in mind, we can not only use them to remove some of the complexity but also sustain it. And we'll touch on each three of these areas now as we go through. So this is a busy slide, apologies for it. We'll spend a fair bit of time on this and I'll talk you through what we mean and use an example to bring it to life. What we've got here really is that the first step in it is to really understand the current lay of the land. So engage and collect data. So create your hit list. So how bad is this complexity? Where is it? Where's the energy for it? So who's really passionate about it? And where is the most time being wasted? And start to match that to your week. So how much of the activity you really spend is driving your biggest priority or the organization's priority. And creating that list where you can then start to challenge which of the opportunities I want to go after. So if we take a notional example of a sales guy who goes through this process. So one of the opportunities might be that, I feel like there are 3 people in my team spending up to 5 hours a week creating a sales report for the senior leadership team. But actually what I always get is a one-line email from each of them saying, so James, what is it that actually, what is it that's going on? So my sense is I'm not sure people are really reading this, and that's 15 hours of capacity of my team that we're using up. So that would end up on my hit list, if you like. The next step then is, once you've got that hit list of complexity, start digging into what's really causing it. So there's no point in just solving for symptoms. There's no point in just only taking away the report or removing a meeting or whatever it may be. That's a good thing for creative capacity and for quick wins, but it's not going to solve it long term. So, for example, in the reporting one, some of the causes of why this report continues to get produced might be, well, actually no one is ever questioning what it's for. So is it to make a decision? Is it just to keep management happy? What's really done with it? What's the value of it? The responses, no doubt you'll always hear as well, it's just been done this way, or in response to a crisis or an issue. So we lost a key account 5 years ago, so we need to stay on top of the numbers. Well, is that really what you need going forward every week? So then in terms of, once you've started to understand for your top 1, 2, 3, 5, whatever complexity areas is what the root causes are, then start to design a simpler way. And here, this is to the page before, what you don't want to do is always start from scratch and over and engineer a solution which actually may not end up working because you've not tested it yet, or other people have done something similar. The beauty of this everyday complexity in one way is that everyone experiences it. So all organizations have ineffective reporting or processes or meetings, and so you can learn from them. Now, clearly your culture and your circumstances will be different, and those solutions need to be adapted to that. But start with something that you've already seen is successful elsewhere or has been tried. So the next step would then be test it. Go and test it as quickly as you possibly can. So, for instance, with the management reporting example, what you can do is go and create a simple version of that. So what is the one-page version of that report? Share it with 2 of the friendly senior leaders. Say, look, Joe, look, Jane, does this make sense? What do we need to change? Test it. Go and get a 5-minute slot at your team meeting. Ask for other ideas as to what could be done, how it could be made simpler. We've learned hopefully from software developers and startups that the world is changing a lot. We won't be able to predict every outcome, so let's get out there and test stuff before we make a really big change, which actually won't end up landing. So then you've got your tests, you've got your results, then it's come back and, okay, what are we actually going to do? So we've learned a lot from the tests. We might choose that the plan is we need to do some more testing because that didn't work. But ultimately, once you've got your idea clear through a series of experiments, is creating a page that, okay, it holds you to account to say this is what I'm going to do. But more importantly, in most things, you will need people's engagement, like with any change in an organization. So creating a really simple pitch page, we've called it, but essentially a summary of what is it we're going to try and do, why is that good for the organization, but also for those individuals. So what are they going to be able to do more of if we simplify this? And you can then use that to go around the business and garner support, whether that's support advocacy or whether that is physical resources of people to support you to develop whatever it is that you need developing, or cash to make it happen. And then finally, all of the other stuff is kind of really nice and really interesting, but a bit pointless unless we find a way to make it stick. So really on this bit, it is about providing the environment where it's okay, it's fun, it's even cool to start doing some of this stuff. So how do you create a group setting where people can share successes and failures, whether that's a Yammer group, whether that's face-to-face meetings, whatever it may be, but a way that you can create some kind of community. And clearly this is easier when you create a critical mass. So if you've got a lot of people learning this capability, it's going to be much easier for you to keep that momentum going. And then it's all the traditional things that is always worth considering, whether that's formalizing objectives or whether it's borrowing the Richard Sounds example of introducing excuse the French, a crap committee slot for every team meeting where someone is tasked with showing what they've improved that week, that month, basically creating the environment where you can go and test and learn. The second part of what we wanted to talk about is the everyday activity. So these are the learning from others to start creating some of those solutions. So whether that is, meetings, prioritization, but don't start from scratch, don't engineer it, over-engineer it. What these do, we found, and I'll admit we found slightly surprising, is actually often even this seems like kind of normal, tangible, real stuff. People don't have necessarily the confidence to go and try. So by sharing examples of what other people have done, it gives a kind of a friendly kind of arm around the shoulder or a nudge to go and try it. So a couple of the examples I'll pick out. Decision first meetings is one of our personal favorites, but unfortunately rarely when we see go into organizations do we see people using it. So the purpose of this is to avoid big long talking shop meetings. So the agenda, the meeting owner would, rather than just send out an agenda with points, is actually turn those agenda items, if they are decisions, and hopefully most meetings are covering making decisions, is to turn the agenda into, okay, these are the agenda points and this is the decision we need to make, and this is my suggestion for the answer. So for instance, rather than sending out a launch to the Philippines as the agenda item, it would be, are we going to launch in the Philippines? And the agenda owner would, the meeting owner would put, yes, launch in Philippines in Q4 2017 with the help of Bob's team, for instance. And then you go through the meeting where actually if everyone agrees with that and that's the right solution, you don't end up spending hours debating it, you just get on with it because that makes sense. So it's one to kind of instill a bit of discipline into meetings, but also just make sure that you don't go round and round and round and talk about the same things. You also then have a record of, okay, this was the decision that was made and we can all move on. Another example I just wanted to briefly share was on information reporting. So we work with a high street retailer whereby they had a real problem with stores being overwhelmed with management reports from head office. The first step they did was actually, let's just say we stop sending those reports, and then you'll quickly find out who cares about the information that you've been sending out and does the business grind to a halt. Now that's not doing it irresponsibly, it's clearly doing it in a controlled way. But it's the first step of seeing what is really valuable and what is not. And then they went on to do a full review, and what we found is we were able to reduce from over 200 reports going to stores to around 50. So a lot of this stuff has just accumulated over time, but no one's taking the time to say, okay, hang on a minute, guys, what can we do about this? Let's stop some of this because we've got better things we could be doing. And then on behaviours, so we've got 5 behaviours that we tend to focus on, which we know from our experience drive simplicity, but by no means are they the only behaviours. So candour, clarity, cooperation, empowerment and focus are what we tend to talk about. And what it really does is it gives you a starting point for a debate. It's not this is the intellectually right answer. And how we use behaviours in our work is two things. So one is the more traditional, absolutely get participants in a program to look at and say, what's the one behavior, 2 behaviors even they want to work on. So something they're already good at and they want to build on that strength, or something that is really holding them back and needs to be brought up to a hygiene level. And the other is actually to use this lens of behaviors to look at the root causes of the complexity of all the activity. So connecting it with the activity. So if you look back to the reporting example, what is causing, so for instance, candour would be one. A lack of candour is meaning that people are not willing to challenge the leadership team to say, do you really need this report? So using them as a lens to tackle, to understand the root cause of the complexity, but then once you're developing a solution for that problem is then to use it and say, okay, well, we need candour for this to work, or we need cooperation for this to work. How do we build that into the solution? How do we ensure that people are cooperating in the new world once we redesign this process or this reporting pack. And I mean, most of it is self-explanatory there in terms of you need to explain what they are, have a definition as we've shown on the right-hand side of the page there, show them the good and the bad. So in practice, when people are not being candid, what are the kind of scenarios that you see yourself in when you know you should speak up, but you just don't, you just bite your lip and regret it later. And in getting feedback, not all of us are deeply self-aware, and it helps to have people tell us where, especially as a people manager, you have a disproportionate effect on the complexity your team experiences. What are the things that you do that is both helping them simplify their lives, but also making things more complex? And then finally, making it so it can stay a bit academic, but what are the things that we can help people with to bring those behaviours to life? So on the candor example, in a telco we work with, and this is shamelessly stolen from the BBC, stop the bureaucracy campaign that they had, is in a jokey way, mostly, depending on your culture, but showing someone a red card and say, hey, look, what are we doing this for? This doesn't make sense. So one guy was able to challenge his boss, who insisted on saving all sorts of documents just in case something happens, and said, look, I'm spending 2 hours a week just doing this. This doesn't make sense. And with the aid of a kind of a tool, you're able to kind of bring it to life and get people to take notice. So for behaviours, trying to find what are the practical ways you can then go and practice this behaviour. So then the final thing that we promised to share was really, we appreciate that this is not always the most easy to get people to engage with internally. And that, that goes again for many change programs, but I think particularly on simplification, which is seen as something, well, it's so obvious, isn't it? Well, of course, we'll just stop doing it. It's not, it's easy, or the converse, well, it's just too hard. That's just the way the business works. These are sort of a few of the tips that we found to be helpful. So one around showing the value is absolutely try and talk in the language of the business. So all of this stuff should be measurable. So we should be able to measure how much time have we saved. Ultimately, complexity, unnecessary internal complexity leads to unnecessary activity. And if you're able to treat that or get rid of that complexity, you remove some of the activity you've previously spending time on. That gives you a time number. And from that, you can convert to pounds, if you like, with salaries, loaded costs, whatever you like, and to full-time equivalents, the number of people involved as well. Or it may be something more personal. It may be, what's the product you're selling? So how many new mobile phone contracts do we need to sell just to have this meeting? How many seats on an airplane do we need to sell to justify, creating this report once a week? And then start to paint the vision of, okay, what would we do with 20% more of our time? So get people dreaming. Actually, that means we could really double down on this strategic priority, which would step us well ahead of our competition. Or for me personally, that would make me stand out. That would make me get the dream job or move role, get promotion. Secondly is, this stuff can be changed quite easily. Some of it's very hard, some of it's easy. So what are the quick things you can do under the radar to prove it, to create those proof points in consulting jargon? What are the things that you can do that will make it easy for you to have those conversations around the business? So try them in your own team, do a team meeting and follow up with another one and see what you've been able to change. And then feel the pain. Is ironically, everyone creates this complexity, but we also feel the pain of it. So tapping into the emotions, getting people to share their own stories, having a bit of fun as to the most ridiculous bit of complexity around, will start to build the engagement and see that this is a problem that not only is worth tackling because there's a lot of money on the table, but is also fun and heartening to tackle. So that's really all we wanted to share. On the last slide, we had 3 case studies of our clients where it just shows from left to right the different types of things you can do at different levels. So as we said at the beginning, important to equip the organisation across the organisation. So on the left, frontline staff, managers, and then leadership programs. So if you really want to make a change, you need to kind of influence as far up and down an organisation as across it. And happy to share more details on those offline, but just wanted to give a sense of what's possible. So I've probably talked enough for the time being, so just wanted to take a few questions and just give us 1 second to have a look at what's coming in, and feel free to, we've probably got time for 2 quick ones, so we'll take one, and if there's any burning questions, feel free to continue to type. So how do you measure the impact of this? Sorry, I'm just trying to figure that out. How do you measure the impact of this if people are empowered to get on with it themselves? Okay, so if I take that to mean people are going away and trying to simplify in their own way, take it into their teams, etc. How do you then measure what's been changed? So I think that's a good question. Every change that people make, ideally, we are capturing what that impact is. But the only way you're going to really do that is to make it super simple, so less than 60 seconds. And whether that's a internal tool like Pinnaper or a Yammer group, but getting somewhere where people can just log without having to do reams of reporting, log what's the impact that they're making. You can then aggregate that, and you can convert that time into money or headcount. But you can also, importantly, start to share that within the business and create the kind of a movement and show the sponsors this is worth doing, but also reward and celebrate the people who have been able to change stuff. Would your slides be available for me to share with senior managers here? Absolutely. We will send out the slides after the presentation is finished, and then we'll share our contact details as well if you want any more detail on them, because I appreciate some of the slides are quite high level and there's more that we've voiced over. But yes, we can do that for sure. In interest for us staying on brand and not wasting anyone's time, I think we'll close it there, but we will pick up with all the other questions on an individual basis afterwards. But just to say thank you very much for your time. We've got another webinar which is going to focus really on the root causes, so uncovering the root causes of complexity towards the end of October. Look out for how to sign up on our newsletter on our website, and we're going to look to do our webinar on a monthly basis, so we can share more thoughts and more thought starters for you. On that note, thank you very much for the time, and we will send out the slides off in the next couple of days. All right, thank you very much. Bye.